So a couple of years ago, I was approached. So I want to talk about how we got to here, how we went about what we researched, what our assumptions, foundations were, because that's going to be critical here. What we found, then, of course, the conclusions. Hopefully not too much of a surprise. So initially, when we looked at this proposal that came to us from Jersey, Canada, what we did do, and so we had a few basic premises. The issue is that, first of all, the cost to get into the business is ever increasing. For new entrants, we always hear words from the Ministry of Agriculture, how to get young people into this business when it's so expensive to get in. And how do existing farmers stay operational, functioning, and also how do they pass it on to the next generation? Because there's a lot of money involved here. And we all know, as I used to teach tax, Canada Revenue Agency is always standing there with their hands out. And at the same time, we have an assumption that all farms strive to be most profitable and efficient. Regardless, you're a business people, it's an entrepreneur. And that all 7 breeds are different. Yes, they're the same species, but they're going to be a little bit different. But most of the data out there, because we have, 95% of the herds are Holstein, are based on Holstein. But the other breeds are going to be a little bit different. Different size, different characteristics. So our goal was, because didn't put it on that intro, but I'm also an accountant. But I'm not a financial accountant, I'm a management accountant. So I look at how to help run a business better. So how can you make the money or meet the goals of the organization better? So that's what we want to do. To get the best return, get the highest profit for the work done. So we gathered our data initially from you folks, Dairy Farmers of Ontario, CDN, OMAFRA, DHI, and some of the industry organizations as well. Then we went through some fairly complicated calculations. The input costs to raise and maintain a herd, breed by breed, as much data as we could get by breed. And there were some limitations here. And then we compared some of the component pricing between the different marketing boards, which makes sense. And then our conclusions are based on the cost breakdown, and we did an income statement because that's virtually an international form of communication. I could present that and the numbers would flow. You may not understand all the words, but in any language, it's going to be the same. If you're in China, they'd still understand what the numbers are about. So we went for that. Then 2 basic numbers, return on investment and how much is the net income on a breed-by-breed basis. So that's basically where we went to. So go to you folks, you have the data, that's the best way. So our key assumptions, this is where we started, we have to sort of stick here. And we based everything on 90 kilos of pork. That gives us a nice foundation, something that's nice and stable all the way across. And then we looked at our revenue based on all 3 measures and the volumes that you would get for those volumes, that quota by different breed. And then we also had to figure out a cull rate, how much we would get for a cull cow. Because we actually had to eliminate any value for cull bull calves because the market is so varied. If you're very close to Toronto, there are some people that want to cull bull calves, but not everybody can have a market for it, so we discarded that. But we used the 61 cents per pound because we found that at a good price that seemed to be reasonable or somewhere to start. Then our expenses, this is where things get very fun. We looked at feed, at labor, I used a Canadian spelling. We presented something like this in the States, and they didn't like that labor spelling. We tried to tell them it was correct. We looked at our veterinary cost, we looked at our reproduction cost, and we used all market rates because we believe that the value of the feed, whether you produce it or not, is going to be valued at what the market you would have to pay for it. Because you're worth at least what it would cost to hire somebody to do that work. As a matter of fact, I can work it out so that there's nobody in this room that's worth less than $60 an hour. You may not get $60, but everybody's worth at least $60 an hour. Then our investments. Now, we priced all the assets, all the fixed assets at replacement cost. This is the current market price today, if we had to do it. But we excluded land because, let's face it, if I'm in Alberta or BC or Pell Valley, Renfrew, Perth County, anywhere in the country, the values, Annapolis, the values can be all over the place. So ignore that, because we're only looking at what can be controlled within this. So it actually, and I'll get to that a little later as well, where we have some other factor there. So we excluded land, excluded other equipment, because somebody's going to have a 90 horsepower tractor, how big a snowblower do you have? That's a particular decision by farm, not breed to breed. So we ignored that. Herd value, because you can also breed your own herd. Now the financial costs, because I've had arguments with some of my colleagues down in the States, when they do cost of production, they include a cost of capital. And so I excluded that because to everybody I've looked at and talked to, the financing decision of how to finance, that's a personal decision to management executives. Somebody may want to go all equity, use their own money. Somebody may want to borrow as much as possible from the bank. And that's a decision that's done on a business-by-business case. So we excluded that as well. So you can't really include that in the whole decision. So what do we do from there? So basically, can't figure out how you're going to do it, but at that 90 kilos, you need 76.89 Holsteins. So we went as accurate as we could. We know you're not going to have that. But these are the numbers we came up with dry, etc. And you wind up with very large numbers and differences of herds. And you've got to feed them all. So we had to factor in all these costs, and these are the numbers that we worked out based on industry production numbers. So what do we find for how much you have to put out? And this is where some things got a little bit more interesting. For your freestall, and that's what we decided, and we can go further, and I have other pictures if you need them. And the parlor, different size of parlor, different animals, different size of animals. The milk tank was based on how much milk you're going to actually need to hold. The manure tank, those brown Swiss really put out a lot. And the quota, obviously that's going to be the same. We're only looking at what really changes is different, but the quota is the anchor for everything. The total fixed investments doesn't look like a lot, but really that's a lot of money, because we have not included any of the land, any of the other equipment. We haven't got a fence post in there. We haven't got a chiller. We've got nothing else in there. We haven't got a laneway. So basically this is what we looked at. And you can see that the investments vary significantly by breed. And really the quota is the biggest portion. But as you can see, some of the fixed assets, other than quota, are not large numbers, but they do vary significantly across breeds. This is based on the size of the animal, how much you have to have. The revenues, well, that's also going to be different. And yes, you get more money. And what shocked us was how much you get on the Shorthorn. And for the butterfat, protein, other solids, the value for the cull cows, notice for Jersey, it's very small, but of course they're small breed. And then the value of the manure, we included that at the market prices or values for the different inputs. So these are the values that you get for your resources or a replacement of a cost. So this is where all the numbers come up, but sometimes it's better to look at picture. But the numbers do come out, and you can see the revenue for Holsteins, 484, 466, 484 again for Brown Swiss, 480, 517. Shorthorns are way up there. 458, 480. So the numbers are not a lot different. Total revenue, once you threw in the cull cows and the manure, there is starting to be a significant difference. And of course, we did not include breeding stock, any genetics that you're selling, because that's going to be something farm by farm. Some people are good at it, some people go for volume, some people that's what they hang their hat on. But this is the general numbers. I have had one bank approach me, they want to see these numbers as well. So different numbers. Expenses, put in a picture, sometimes worth more than 1,000 words. You don't have to listen to me. But yes, milking Shorthorn, high revenue, but they also have high expenses. And this is where we suspected this would happen with the Jerseys, that their expenses are significantly lower than everybody else. And to feed them, for milking cows, for the heifers, labor, we did work it out based on how many minutes, how many hours it would take to milk each day. And we figured out that each person working on the farm, I said, yes, you're worth about $60 an hour, but how much you're paying somebody. So we figured $15 an hour, and we grossed it up to include CPP, EI, and the other expenses for about another 14%. So it came to $17.10. And then we just did how many hours just for milking. We didn't include the other costs. And we went through all these different numbers, what happens, and as you can see, the expenses are very different. Oh, the other thing I wanted to draw attention to is, notice that under Holstein and Jersey, the very top, there's only two little blue bars there, light blue, because we could only get medical expense numbers for those two breeds. So, yes, the other numbers may be comparable, but we don't have the medical expenses included in there. So they would be even higher. Even if they were at the same rate as Jerseys, you'd have to tack on about another $13,000 a year. So this is what they came out to, if you want the numbers. So feed for the milking herd, there's $30,000 difference. There's $70,000 difference between the Jersey and the Brown Swiss. So it's the conversion of the feed. Now that does not factor in whether or not the individual farmer is producing the feed, but this is what that feed is worth if they had to go outside to buy it. That's what our proxy was. How much do you have to pay somebody else for? The heifers, how much to feed them, how much to feed the calves. There's our milking labor. It's not a lot. If I look at the two primary breeds, Holstein and Jersey, $3,000, not a lot, but I've also got $30,000 difference on a milking herd. I've got $8,000 difference, I've got another $3,000 difference. So it all starts to add up. It's not the money coming in, it's the money going out. So the deductions are for milk, truck, what have you, how much they charge for delivery, for pickup. The reproductive costs, as you can see, medical only have for two breeds. Even though you have a larger herd for Jersey, you have lower medical. So this is all the data we got from veterinary college, etc. How much does it actually cost? Reproductive cost, it's also, the data shows a little bit less. But we don't have those medical costs for the other breeds. This was one of our major things, return on investment. The same thing if you invested in the stock market or worked with Warren Buffett or anybody else. How much are you going to make on the money that you've got invested? And remember, we're only talking about $2.5 million here. So the revenue for Holsteins include the culls, the manure is included, so your earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization. You have no replacement costs or whatever, wear and tear, etc. And it comes out to, wait a minute, that's $20,000 more for the Jerseys. And bear in mind, the Brown, Swiss, Ayrshire, Shorthorn, Guernsey, and the Canadienne, none of those earnings have got factored in the medical cost. So you could easily drop $15,000 off each of those. Well, then I'll be looking at Brown Swiss at below $100,000. And Ayrshire, about 110. Shorthorn. Now remember, I'm an accountant. These are just numbers. I'm not necessarily management. But this is the numbers that come up. So the percentage, 32%. We would call that an operating income or quasi-operating income versus 26, 27, 23, 20%. On an investment of $2.8, $2.7 million, 5%, 5.9%. 0.9%, would you tell your stockbroker to change what your investments were? Would you tell your banker, move me out of one mutual fund to another mutual fund? On a very cold decision-making method, you go for the highest percentage. Very measured, then you go for that. And the herd size, and then what we did, we said, what if we charge 6% interest on that $2.8, $2.7 million and charge against that earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization? And if you look at that bottom number, compare it to the EBITDA, or my students call it EBITDA. I've never heard it called EBITDA before. But if I charge that 6% interest against the 141, I'm not making money. You're working for the bank. Being a former banker is sad. Interest for the Jersey, it turns out to be the only breed that actually has a positive return, which is kind of scary. So our basic results. You need less investment for the Jerseys. Smaller barn, smaller tanks, manure and milk, and your operating costs are a little bit lower, and lower revenue. It's always bad. So the absolute profit for Jerseys are about $18,000 more, excluding interest. The profit margin, it's about 5%, so we're just comparing against Holstein. Higher return on investment. I was just straight talking to Warren Buffett or somebody down on Wall Street or Bay Street, you go for the 5.9, because this is a pretty stable industry. Nice industry to be in. Holsteins, higher investment required, higher revenue, but higher operating costs. Other things we came up with. Even on the second or third gestation, Holsteins need help 30% of the time. And the other breeds, it seems the smaller, older breeds have fewer medical problems. Maybe some of those issues have been bred out. You do get higher revenue for bull calves due to size if you get it, if there is a market. Conclusion. You can't control your prices, right? You might be able to influence them. You might be able to have some little say on it, but you can't control the prices. Because ultimately, whoever has the most information in the marketing, the value chain, most likely the retailers or the processors, are going to call most of the shots. Because they have the most information. That's power. You can't control your prices. So the focus for producers is to focus on your costs. Those you can control. So lowering or managing the costs. So to get higher profits, to get higher returns, and better debt servicing. Because I always think in the back of my mind, there's FCC or TD or Royal Bank or John Deere Credit. They're all standing there and they're looking at the credit worthiness of the producer. How well are you going to be generating money? So select the most profitable breed. I don't expect everybody's going to jump over to Jerseys right away. Can't do that. It doesn't make sense. But if I was going to be doing that, I would do that. So in Canada, the breed with the optimal financial return, based on numbers, is Jersey. Now that does not include the fact that some of you produce your own feed. Then that money's going keeping within the house, controlling costs. But based on the numbers, I would go with Jersey. Smaller breeds, they're more efficient. Canada can get cold in the winter. Well, you have to feed them just to stay warm. How much food do they have to eat just to be alive? The smaller breeds tend to be more fertile. It's 1.67 versus 1.47 insemination for Holsteins versus Jerseys. It doesn't sound like a lot at $37, $38 in insemination. If you do that for 100 animals times 0.2, that's $7.40 per animal times 100 animals. It starts to add up. It's just a little bit. It's death by the small of 1,000 cuts. Fewer birthing issues. The stillborn for Holsteins is about 5, and for Jerseys about 1.8 per 100. That hurts. You've just lost a chance. So fewer birthing issues, fewer health issues, and the data proved out for that as well. Fewer stillbirths, and can be bred younger and gestation is shorter. When we looked at the data, it turned out you could breed Jerseys about 10 days sooner than the 2 large breeds, and the gestation was 20 days shorter. So to a cost accountant, I'm just looking at that going, wait a minute, I can start milking 30 days sooner? And we based everything on 305 days of milk for all breeds. So 30 days sooner, I get my money 30 days sooner. So it actually showed up how many days after the second anniversary of birth before you start milking. And less labor. Or labor can be used on something else. So that's all well and good. I'm an academic. I work in a university, but what's next? I'd like to confirm this current situation for use by all parties involved. This will be my ongoing. One thing I did mention to Jersey Canada is I want to build a tool. We just finished and we're trying out another tool. I was mentioning earlier, I do work on hazelnuts as well. And we developed a tool for people to go online and input their data to see what it would be like for them. So I'd like to develop another tool to use it for potential entrance into the dairy industry where they can put in their numbers. What would it be like for you to go into this business? And we want to compare all the milks, all species. There was another dairy farmer says, you know, you should look at all the different species that produce milk. And then, just as another aside, I like to compare dairy to other sources of protein, such as other animal protein, eggs, etc., plants, tree nuts, because as we have genetic or ethnic diversity in Canada, they're going to want the sources of protein in different ways. So that's where I'm going to go, and that's where I think we can go. So back to the conclusions. Those are our basic results for 2 breeds. So I think that's about all I need to say, but I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. And thank you very much for your time.